Welcome to a Heidi inspired video. I give a more formal introduction in a bit, but until then I want to show myself preparing a crusty sourdough loaf. And while I do that, I want to chat a bit about the novel, which I will also introduce more in depth in a bit. One aspect that encouraged me when reading Heidi was the simplicity and repeatability of the food she ate. Living on the mountain with her grandfather and goats, most days she went up higher on the mountain with the goat herd Peter and the goats. On those days, her lunch was usually goat cheese, crusty bread, and fresh milk from the goats. So simple, but so nutritious. And she likely ate that most days. Sometimes she maybe got preserved meat as well, or fresh vegetables, but it was simple. This was my inspiration behind making a crusty sourdough loaf, and I'm going to be taking it along with some cheese for our picnic tomorrow outside. So here's the dough starting to come together. I'm just adding the liquid with the sourdough starter to my flour and salt and giving it a nice stir with my wooden spoon. I really encourage anybody who's wanted to try sourdough bread baking to just give it a go because it's honestly not as hard as you might think. But back to the story. It's interesting that a demonstration of Heidi's character that the story makes actually has to do with crusty versus soft bread. You see, Peter's grandmother, he's the goat herd, is blind and has bad teeth, so the crusty bread is difficult for her to eat. Heidi has such sympathy for her that when she's in Frankfurt, known for their soft white buns, she stores away her dinner rolls and hopes to bring them back to grandmother. She unfortunately did not understand that the rolls would not stay fresh that long. But the thoughtfulness of Heidi inspired the family to send her home with a bag full of rolls for grandmother, and oh how delighted she was to receive them. But crusty bread will do for us for now. Hello and welcome. My name is Carrie Ann, and in this video I'm showing you a Heidi inspired day. Heidi is a character created by Johanna Spyri. This is the first edition of Heidi that I ever read. I read it first as an adult a couple years ago. I'm just going to read this little excerpt in the front of this version. One sunny day, Heidi, the little Swiss orphan girl whom no one seemed to want, was taken up the alpine mountainside to live with her grouchy and hermit-like grandfather in his lonely hut high above the village. As Heidi scampered about the mountain pastures among her grandfather's goats, she found health and pleasure for herself and brought great joy into the heart of the strange old man. Here is a beautiful illustration in the front of the book. I thought this was a beautiful addition, and after watching a video by I'm not really a YouTube creator, after a YouTube creator, Ruby Granger, on the act of Grangerizing books, I felt inspired, since this story meant and impacted me so much, to go ahead and Grangerize this book. That just means to insert pictures or other paraphernalia into your book, which has significance to the story or reminds you of the story. and I had some of these beautiful European postcards that just reflected moments in the story. Like this is what I think of when I think of her climbing up the mountain with Peter and the goats and enjoying the flowers. And like some others, for stories that I really have become fond of and that I want to be able to read to my children, I have collected a few editions of them so that we can one day sit around our living room and everybody can have an edition in hand and enjoy the book. So this one is by far just the most memorable to me. It was the first one that I read, a beautiful hardback, and I've started to Grangerize it. But I also found this other sweet paperback edition. Doesn't have any illustrations, but it's also really lovely. And then this was a nice find for me because I actually collect these this Junior Deluxe Edition series. I try to find as many editions as I can. They were kind of a series that was printed in the 50s. They're nothing like super valuable, but I just really like the editions, and they have lots of classic children's stories. But this one does have, a set of its own illustrations, and I thought this was just such a perfect find when I found it because I was already collecting this type of series. The things that stood out the most to me in Heidi were the characterizations of home and environment and how much health and joy and vitality it can bring you dependent on where you live and who you're living with. And also companionship and loving the people around you. Heidi is just a resilient little girl who's full of joy and life, and she brings joy to all the people that she meets, and it's really such a touching and inspiring story. And those are some things I want to emphasize in this video. Remembering things that you loved about your family recipes, good food, enjoying, and a big theme of Heidi also is just enjoying the great outdoors, that nature and the creation is able to heal you and bring you health and a wealth better than anything money could buy you. And so those are the things that I'm going to be featuring in this video, and I hope that you enjoy these Heidi inspired moments. As we start our hike up the mountain, I wanted to share this passage from the novel. The valley lay far below in the full morning sunshine. In front of her, Heidi saw a great wide field of snow, stretching high up into the deep blue sky. On the left stood an enormous mass of rock, on each side of which a higher tower of bald, jagged cliffs rose into the sky and looked very sternly down on Heidi. The child sat as still as a mouse. Everywhere there was a great, deep stillness. Only the wind passed very softly and gently over the tender bluebells and the radiant golden rock roses, which were everywhere gaily nodding to and fro on their slender stems. Peter had gone to sleep after his labor, and the goats were climbing among the bushes. Isn't that a lovely passage? Like I mentioned in my greeting, nature is a big theme in Heidi. The open air and lush setting of the Alps is specifically contrasted to life in the dense city of Frankfurt. Heidi lives in both regions and becomes miserably ill while living in the city. Now, I don't think the novel was to critique the whole of city life, as cities are valuable in their own way, but I do think it critiques the isolated and interior-focused life of most wealthy city families at that time. Here we almost got blown away. It was so windy. So windy on the mountain. Heidi actually becomes homesick in Frankfurt, sick for the mountain and her grandfather and the goats, and it's advised by the doctor that she returns home, or else she might become just even more unwell. It reminds me a lot of Charlotte Mason's writing on childhood and the importance of nature. Mason encourages taking meals outdoors and children spending as much time outside as possible. As a novel, Heidi demonstrated the importance of this through Clara, who later in the novel comes to visit Heidi on the mountain, and, well, I'll leave that discovery up to you. But after all that exercise, I think we earned some dessert, which is what I'm making here. Kuchen is like the German word for cake, but it's used for a variety of dessert that may or may not look cake-like. For example, my great-grandma's Kuchen recipe, she's the German heritage in my family, is actually more akin to a custard pie than to anything cake-like. It has this unique type of crust that's not a typical pie crust and is then filled with fruit and a custard and baked. The iconic flavor was always rhubarb. The tang contrasts nicely with the sweetness of the custard. Making Kuchen with my mom is such a fun practice, but today I'm making a kind of modified Kuchen recipe that's quicker and easier than the usual type. This version uses a bar pan and a shortbread crust as the base of the recipe, and then proceeds to be filled with fruit and custard and baked. Here I made a strawberry rhubarb one, which is a great choice as well, but there's so many fruits or combinations that you can try. A new favorite my mom and I have discovered is pear and ginger. Another endearing quality about Heidi was how she enjoyed the company of whomever she could, with no discrimination to their age or occupation. I truly believe the relationships we have with people is the most valuable part of life. However boring it might seem on the surface, just being in the company of family or friends, even if it's just sitting on my porch and chatting, is the most enriching moments of my days. Heidi loved spending time with Peter on the mountain, chatting with her grandfather or visiting Peter's blind grandmother. Later, she developed a relationship with Clara, which would change Clara's life in the most miraculous way. People truly are our greatest capital, and I hope to never take that for granted. So here, as I've been working, I've been mixing up the custard that is going to go over the fruit in the shell. It's just really a mixture of eggs, sugar, vanilla, some flour, and good old heavy cream. It's really quite delicious. And once that is all mixed up and the crust is cooked, I pour on the fruits and then I pour on the custard and put it in the oven to bake some more. And this is going to be a nice treat to enjoy with my mom, my grandma, and another friend of ours, family member of ours, and my daughter. We're going to enjoy it out on the porch. Now, I know this video has been very food heavy, but for some reason that's just what I felt very inspired by Heidi to focus on. And in this portion of the video, I'm going to be making a German recipe. Now, the mountainous part of Heidi is set in Switzerland, but a portion of the book is set in the city of Frankfurt, Germany, when Heidi is taken to live with a wealthy family to be a companion to the wheelchair-bound daughter, Clara. So the book is a mix of Swiss and German influence, which is perhaps why I'm also so fond of it. I have German heritage on my mother's side and grew up with some German foods. Keeping these foods alive in my family helped me feel connected to my heritage and to a land I haven't had the pleasure of meeting yet. The recipe I'm making here is called knoephla. It's a type of dumpling commonly cooked alongside potatoes and served with onions and breadcrumbs. Ding dong, which is dead, which kid went. This meal was always a family delight, though rarely made, even though now as an adult I've learned it's not as hard as I thought to make. Now, knoephla can be served up a couple different ways, at least the way my family likes to enjoy it. There's the dry version where you'll strain it, brown up some onions and breadcrumbs, and then fry the knoephla and potato mixture in the onions and breadcrumbs, and that's dry. Another version is knoephla soup. That's where you take the potato and knoephla, you use some of the leftover cooking water from when you boiled them, mix in some heavy cream and salt, pepper, maybe a little bit of garlic powder, and then you also top it with a mixture of the cooked onions and breadcrumb. And that's usually my preference, is the knoephla soup, same with my mom and my grandma, but it's also really good dry. So those are two options, and I'll show you a bit of it. Look at all those carbs. If serving knoephla dry, a couple sides I recommend are your favorite sausage or schnitzel, or cucumber salad, or a red cabbage or sauerkraut type of thing. I'm gonna make some cucumber salad. Sour cream, good dose of salt, pepper, garlic powder, not too much, but you definitely need some. And if you have green onion on hand, you can put that in, or chives, but in this case, I'm just gonna put a little bit of onion powder. Stir it all up and enjoy. Oh, I forgot dill, the most crucial ingredients. Dill is what makes the cucumber salad. This is some dill from my garden last year that I dried and put in this very aesthetic plastic bag. Here's what the onions and breadcrumbs look like when they're kind of all nicely fried up. And you can either add it to the whole pot, just mix it in, or you can leave it on the side and top dress it on your plate or in your soup bowl. Here's the finished plate. So the way it seems to be going in my personal doll collection, I don't want to call myself a doll collector, but I have a few, is that they end up being characters that I find very meaningful to me. You might see a sneak peek on my shelf over here that I have a doll made to look like Alice. I have another doll that's very reminiscent to me of Anne from Anne of Green Gables and Shirley. In my previous video, I shared my Kit Kittredge doll. And today I want to share a very special doll, probably one of the most special in my collection, and she is 1986, so the oldest doll in my collection currently. Good's doll, and her name officially is Dorothy. Isn't she darling? Her name is officially Dorothy, but for this video, I thought that she was very reminiscent of our own version of Heidi. She has this beautiful double braided crown with her ribbon on top, and her very Germanic inspired outfit. This was such a special story for me because I actually found her like in the wild in a thrift store, and I honestly still can't believe it because she was in like full perfect shape. She had all of her clothing pieces, her hair bow. She even had her original tag attached, but my toddler ripped it off. And there she was, just lying on the shelf waiting for me to take her home and love her. And I'm just so curious about what her story is, how she, ended up on that shelf. She was one of the 1986 romantic girls. Goods was very fond of doing kind of like a featurette of 4 dolls that would be under a certain theme and would all share like the same starting letter. So the other girls in her collection were Deborah, Daisy, Daphne, and Dorothy. But in the case of this video, we're gonna call her Heidi. All the dolls are super beautiful. I've had the pleasure of seeing a photo from a different collector who has the 3 others romantic girls, and that was such a real treat because it's really hard to find some of these older dolls.